Test, test, test. You can hear me clearly. Lombardi, Lenny. Very good. You're going to be joining in, Lenny? There we go.
You got me?
I got you.
You got me. Great.
Excellent.
Okay.
You still at the office?
Okay, John. Hold on. I got to put on an earbud. Hold on.
You gotta put it in the case there. You're on vertical, should start on horizontal.
You okay?
I hear you now.
Okay. No, I like it this way. John,
Okay, so we're
does it
clear.
matter if
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, does it matter if I go horizontal?
Okay, let's see what happens if we go horizontal. There we go.
Okay, great. So I just want to hook it up that way.
And you can hear me well?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Very good. Well, we have a lot of people joining in. You're a fan. A lot of
really?
fans out there, Lenny, huh?
Oh, great.
And you're still at the office. We were going to do a test at 7:15, and it's 7:23. Let's just wait for more people to come off. I don't want to disconnect right away, but how are you keeping?
I'm good, John. Why do I see all these barbells in the background?
Well, I'm gonna get to that, and and there's a reason behind it. But it's when you dig, it's really an honor here for me to do these interviews for CIBPA. I'm not much, and I'm a little bit nervous here broadcasting with a broadcaster.
Yeah.
So there's no room after burgers. Maybe I can do some work at Chin.
So consider this an audition.
Look at oh my gosh. But yeah, it's 7:30 start. I think we should probably wait until the end, but there are people joining in. I will be waving at them and sending my regards to all. So let me let's just take this from the top, and we'll take it 5 minutes earlier.
All right.
So let me just go over some protocols over here. It's my great honor and pleasure this evening on our second live Instagram interview at the CIBPA here in Toronto. My name is John Letteri. I am a board member of the CIBPA, and I take great pleasure and great honor to take the responsibility of talking with first generation and second generation, even third generation this evening of Italian origin and people that have great vision and great contribution to the community. This evening, it's my pleasure to have our interview with Lenny Lombardi. Lenny Lombardi is the CEO of Chin Radio and Television here in Toronto, and he broadcasts over many languages. A little bit of a protocol here. How many languages, Lenny?
So we're 4 radio stations, 4 frequencies. We broadcast 50 languages to over 100 communities across Southern Ontario.
It's unbelievable. All in a span of what, 54 years?
54 years, yeah. We just celebrated our 54th birthday on June the 6th.
On June the 6th. Congratulations. So just a little bit of a protocol. All the people attending tonight's discussion, feel free to ask your questions. Lenny requested that we turn the camera sideways. So if I do this, it'll be a little bit not because of my neck, but I'm just going to be doing this to read the questions. So we'll get to all those spectators. Let's keep this as a discussion between yourself, myself, and our community. Just when you came on, you asked, so what's with the weights? So, during the week on my free time, I went through YouTube and I went through all the things I can see of pretty well the history of Chin. And, 2 things came to me, and I lived it through my family, that, especially with Chin and what your father and your family's created here, I came down to two words where it's strength and endurance. and I felt it was adequate that I find myself a gym. And to my left, I have the CIBPA Toronto sign, and
Oh,
to
you
my
did that
right,
for
I
me?
have my weights for my dumbbells. So
Excellent.
that's why we're in a gym, Lenny. I thought it was quite
Wow.
symbolic, and it was just away from the office. So
I thought you were conducting this interview from your personal gymnasium.
I actually am. So it's my little
Well, there you
endurance.
go.
It's my little endurance hideaway that I
There you go. Good for you.
tend to go. So we have a lot of topics that we could possibly talk about, and I think in this time that we're really going through in 2020, or in time in general in life, we need a lot of strength. We need a lot of strength. We need a lot of discussion around either solutions, discussions on situations, and you're really at the forefront. So I'm going to take my first question into, if you look back into the past, and with this pandemic that's going on, and all lives matter situation around the world, looking back in the past with the experience and having lived through the changes in business, family, and in community, how did discrimination historically affect you, your family, and either your father's vision and his I guess his hurdles back in the day, where we were discriminated as a race, and as as a community. So if you can,
Absolutely.
we could take a lead into that. I think this is an interesting topic tonight, and I think it's an important topic because it really makes us understand the past, present, and maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, well, John, I think it's an excellent question, and I've been thinking about it a lot. Like, I think a lot of people have witnessing the demonstrations and the protests, not only in the United States, here in Canada, but around the world. And it really touches close to home for me, because my whole life has been about giving voice and forum to the marginalized, to minority groups who have often been considered second-class citizens in the New World. And so I kind of reflect back on not so much my childhood, but my dad's upbringing, because what is happening to many communities here today in the 2020, happened throughout history, but in particular in Toronto. My dad was born 1915 here in Toronto. A lot of people don't know that, but my dad was Toronto born here in Canada. My grandfather immigrated to Toronto in 1897,
Wow.
and he got his citizenship papers in 1912.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a great, incredible journey. So, that whole immigrant story, what courage those pioneers must have had to leave their home at that time. Imagine, to the turn of the century, and come to North America. What could they have possibly been expecting? And my grandfather just settled and raised his family here. And my dad was born in the ghetto, in the ward, which is right now where Eaton Center is now, but that used to be the ghetto. And he was raised in the ghetto with many other immigrants from Europe and around the world. So he grew up in a marginalized community, if you will. And so discrimination was bred in his bones, if you will. And so he felt the sting very early as a child. But miraculously, he overcame. So he had a tremendous work ethic, fortunately, and he applied himself in many careers throughout his life. And he finally settled on broadcasting. But he was a musician. He was a grocer. He was an impresario. He joined the Canadian Army. He experienced a lot in life. But I think what he took through his entire life was a deep understanding of the immigrant experience. As a young Torontonian born to immigrant parents who couldn't speak a word of English, he became their interpreter. So he had to see the world around him and somehow interpret it to his parents, and for that matter, many of his family and relatives, in a way that was encouraging and brought hope. And that was something that he kind of carried with him all his life. And he always viewed the world in that respect, where there was opportunity, there was hope. that it wasn't just what you see. It's not just desolation. There is something more to be had if you just look for it and work for it. And I think that was sort of the driving spirit behind him and everything he did. And fortunately, he fell in love with broadcasting. You know, he just kind of stumbled on it. It's an interesting story. He stumbled on it because he was in the food business after the Second World War, and someone came into the store to sell him advertising on Chum FM, Chum AM, and he basically said to the salesman, "I'm not interested in buying advertising on your station because my customers, my community doesn't listen to your radio station. But if you sell me some programming time, maybe we can do business." And that's how my dad got involved in broadcasting. He bought a half hour on 1050 Chum and started producing his own programs. And at that time, in the early 50s, it was against the law to speak any other language other than English and French.
Well, let's speak a little bit to that, Lenny. So what year was that there was only allowed to broadcast French and English on radio?
So it's shortly after the war. It didn't get changed probably until the mid to late 50s.
So could we say that your father was part of that change?
Well, you know, he certainly encouraged the decision makers to recognize that it was not a danger to speak a foreign language, and that he was an example, and his community, the Italian community, was a perfect example of peaceful coexistence, even while listening to listening to programming directed to an ethnic community that played Italian music. The decision makers were not fearful of that any longer, and made the decision that it was okay to speak languages other than English and French on the airwaves.
So the discrimination, was there a great deal of discrimination between was it the radio community? Was it the community at large? Was it the business community?
So, I mean, we throw around words like multiculturalism today, like the second nature. But can you imagine back in the late and mid '60s, the word multiculturalism? People didn't understand that. I mean, Canadians were still struggling for their own identity, and now suddenly we were talking about recognizing Canadians from different parts of the world. So, you know, we wanted to recognize and pay respect to Italo-Canadians or Canadians from Poland and so on and so forth. So my dad's radio station, when he was finally licensed, brought that to the forefront. And that, I think, had a tremendous impact, because shortly after that, the Liberal government of the 70s, led by Pierre Trudeau, recognized at that time there was a fierce debate in Quebec about separatism, and the notion of bilingualism was bantered around, and Trudeau stood up and he said, you know, we're not a bilingual country, we're a multilingual country. We have people from all over the world.
And this, in essence, came from your father speaking with Prime Minister Trudeau about this.
They were very close, John. They became very, very close when he became leader of the party. He had a real affinity for the work that my father was doing in multiculturalism and broadcasting. It was very, very new. It was brand new back then. And we were all unsure. My dad in particular was very unsure as to how the winds would blow with respect to how the decision makers might accept this notion of multicultural. It was a big experiment, but Trudeau recognized the worth of it, and in the early 70s developed the policy for multiculturalism in Canada.
So in this world of discrimination back then, post-war, during the Trudeau times, it was your father's vision that allowed him to succumb all the criticism or all the discrimination or all the issues that thought it was impossible to do, to make it possible. So his journey and his vision really was what he saw to be the end result and the betterment of Canada at large, in essence.
It was his life's calling, really was. I mean, my dad.
Moses Zeimer quotes, Johnny Lombardi was a pioneer for all of us. And, you know, Moses Zeimer, the founder of City TV and City Pulse everywhere, it's really, really commendable, you know, that someone of his stature, when he's created in broadcasting, you know, probably had in the back of his mind that, you know, it was John Lombardi that created this and pioneered us all to move forward on our visions in media. And this is really, and how do you, working from that past and working through your father and what he did, and we all, you know, we all respected him. We all watched him. You know, his smile brought the world together and really lit up the room. It was really, you know, you could cover his eyes, and I bet you could even cover his nose. But with that smile, everybody could have identified. How do you see with yourself or presently? How do you take that history and see what's going on with today in the world and kind of put it in place to communicate with viewers or with your fans in the Chin community? Is there any type of mechanism that you have that really kind of sets the stage for today's situation?
Well, you know, my dad dedicated his life to multicultural broadcasting, as I and my family have as well. You know, my sister Teresa is vice president and equal partner. My wife Grace is also very much involved in the company and very much involved in what we do here as a part of Chin Radio. And the groundwork was laid by my father when he started. He started with one station and quickly developed another one on Chin FM. And then I've been very fortunate to add 2 more stations to that to our stable of stations, and we also produce a lot of television content for Omni TV and City Television. And what drives my family and me is the vision that he had with respect to giving and celebrating our cultural diversity. You know, he never believed that for a moment that he was unworthy of respect and equality in Canada, even though he was born as a Canadian. But you know, he lived the Italian experience and the immigrant experience, in particular because of, you know, his beginning days as a food. You know, he was a grocer on College Street, and that supermarket became the mecca for, you know, the first Little Italy in Toronto. You know, here on College and Gray Street, and that where I contend 90% of the Italian immigrants that came to Toronto settled within a 5-mile radius of that epicenter, which was Johnny Lombardi Foods. You know, and then this great community branched out and contributed so much. But it all began there with my dad's reflection of the immigrant experience, and he believed that what was good for his community, that the Italian community, was going to be equally as good for every other community. So he had a great affinity and empathy for newly arrived immigrants, regardless of where they came from. And so he wanted to include them. So instead of doing ethnic broadcasting piecemeal or part-time, where other broadcasters would carry some ethnic programming at late night and then use English language mainstream programming, my dad dedicated Chin Radio and all of its stations 100% dedicated to multilingual languages. And those too small to actually support themselves financially through advertising revenues, he subsidized them with the larger groups. So the Italian community, in many ways, because of their efficiency and success as a community, were able to support the amount of Italian program we offered them. We were able to then carry 20 or 30 or 40 other languages that couldn't afford voice and forum on radio. And therefore, we were able to provide programs that they wouldn't normally have received. And that was at the success of the Italian community, and as a gift, if you will, by all of the larger communities helped subsidize the smaller ones. So he never skimped on that.
Right. So Chin acted and behaved not necessarily just as a media company, but it actually allowed a conclusive community in the other communities. So other communities had everything, but they needed to speak to their communities.
Absolutely. And then that really is the key. It's communication. You know, and I think what makes Toronto so unique, not only in Canada but around the world, and I think, you know, as we evolve more and more as a global society, more and more will turn their eyes to Toronto to see how, in fact, we are managing, you know, the developments that we see there. They're engulfing the rest of the world, and I think even our leadership that has grown up in this great city are responding in a way that we're all very proud of, right? As opposed to what we see around the world and even our neighbors to the south. It's communication. It's an opportunity.
Did we lose you? Lenny, come on back. Ah, technology. But we lost him. You think he left because he didn't want to be here? Lenny Lombardi, view. Oh, gosh. Well, viewers, we just missed Lenny. Hopefully he comes back in, and I'm sure he will. But as you heard from Lenny talking about the history of Chin, and you know, our topic today was, you know, discrimination in business, and really the impact that Chin had on our community, and really how, you know, the Lombardis and Johnny and the family are really the foundation of our media. They're our media arm on really, you know, Johnny Lombardi is being quoted as the great communicator. This is really what he was about, and he really communicated with our community, with the other communities, and, you know, born in or getting his citizenship. He was born here in 1898 and got his Canadian citizenship, I believe. Lenny said in 1912. You know, this really tells you that he was definitely a man, a Canadian. He was a true Canadian at heart, with a great respect for his culture and his heritage, and lived through quite a bit of discrimination. If you read or you look at any of the YouTube documentaries on Johnny, there was a time where they wanted to take this away from him. They wanted to take the fact that he was not able to have any other language other than French and English on the radio, and he changed that. Lenny's conversation sent a request to be in your live video. Yes, you. Okay, so can I get him back in here? Lenny, does this happen? Add. Are we here? Is that possible? I'm trying to get Lenny back in. Lenny.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. This is the beauty of technology. And
I don't know what happened.
Froze there. You got me all great.
Sorry. So did you wrap up the interview? That was really great.
No, it was okay. Your frame froze, but we had a great snapshot of you, and it was all
good.
Well respected.
I don't know. It just dropped out.
Okay, so going into the, you know, understanding this whole, the essence, I guess, the hurdles of initiating this whole Chin Radio. There's a great documentary on YouTube on how he came up with the name, and his challenges of potentially losing the broadcast. It's really fascinating. It's a 49-minute documentary on YouTube, which is really amazing. It has you and your sister speaking of your father, and I'm sure you take great pride in this. And, you know, Lenny, you're just really a stronghold in our community. I got a lot of respect for you. If you could really give us some insight, you know, on how you see the future moving forward, you know, either solving discrimination or handling discriminations, and issues of continue to grow into the multicultural society? And how do you tie that in with those who feel discriminated in the business world? And what you can give them some insight on really, some direction, or if there is a hurdle on what they should really kind of consider and deep down in their essence, to make their dreams possible.
Yeah, John, it's well, by the way, that biography is a family affair. My sister and I were the narrators, if you will, but my wife, Grace Facillo, put that together. She was the director of that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That biography is a great piece of real, not only a history of my dad and ethnic broadcasting, but also a history of the city of Toronto and its development. But I suppose my position and my desire with respect to multicultural broadcasting is, and I feel that it's really created a uniqueness that Canada enjoys around the world, and I link the way that Canadians respond to the issues of discrimination, the issues that we see coming forward with Black Lives Matter. I think there's a greater depth of understanding amongst Canadians that we see perhaps anywhere else in the world. And I really believe that is linked to multicultural broadcasting, but more so the effect that it has had in the last 54 or 60 years that we've been enjoying, this type of programming, because it's very unique in the world. You don't really find this kind of system anywhere in the world. The closest country that comes to Canada is Australia. So we're very unique, and so I grew up in this kind of this kind of atmosphere where we are expected to respect our neighbors, understand their culture, and join with them when we can in the celebration of their culture. And so there's a greater depth of understanding and acceptance amongst the people that we live with. And maybe, if we look back on our history, as far as Torontonians, nothing better reflects that or represents that than the Chin International Picnic back in its heyday, when it started in its humble beginnings on Toronto Island and then moved to, Exhibition Place and hosted over 250 to 300,000 people annually. But it all stemmed from very humble beginnings, but blossomed into something that was a joyous occasion. There wasn't a Torontonian that didn't love the atmosphere, the effect, and the camaraderie, if you will, that the picnic brought. And so this wasn't a cultural event that was specific to the Italian community or Portuguese community or the Chinese or the South Asian. It was an event that encompassed all cultures in the city of Toronto, and we all came and celebrated. So at any given day, you would have 15 different cultural groups celebrating together. So you could wander from stage to stage, enjoy different foods, and hear all sorts of different languages being spoken. And that psychologically broke down the barriers of ignorance and prejudice and misunderstanding, because finally you're out of your own cocoon and you're now rubbing shoulders with people that live in your own city, but perhaps you've never really come face to face with. And that was the slow beginnings of an understanding community like we have in Toronto. And radio in Toronto and Chim Radio does just that on radio every day. We talk to our communities. We interpret the situations that's going on in the city of Toronto. We talk about politics. We talk about religion. We talk about health. And no more is more importantly than what's happening to us now with COVID-19. Can you imagine the fear of a new Canadian whose first language is not English, and the information that they desperately need to understand and know and how to act on is not available to them? But radio and multicultural programming provides that kind of information, and that helps them become better citizens, in fact, right?
So in essence, you got 2 points over here: communication and understanding. Once you break down those barriers and you continue to work with the communities, you kind of find yourself, and you actually did create this multiculturalism. It's unbelievable how, I go around the world and I say we're a multicultural society, and we're multicultural because we understood and the likes of Chin Radio communicated to all the communities from around the world, about this. Where do you see tomorrow? Where do you see community tomorrow moving forward? People are physically staying inside, or they're not going out as much, or they're fearful to, or actually they may be enjoying. I've never seen more people walk around neighborhoods than I have in the past, 4 or 5 months, which is what. Where do you see it as far as Chin's multiculturalism in the world of tomorrow, Lenny?
I see multicultural broadcasting flourishing. I see it as being an integral part of a community's sense of well-being and connectivity. The thing about radio, especially to the multicultural communities, is that it is really rooted in community. It is very grassroots. It's down at the ground level. And often the information that is provided in our network of language programs is only available at that level, on that network. And as long as there's immigration to Canada, as long as we continue to embrace new Canadians and to grow this country, and we're 36 million, in a land that can accommodate far more, and we're learning to do it extremely well. We have lots and lots of room for many people from around the world. And when those new Canadians arrive in this country, they're going to be welcomed with open arms in a way that perhaps our forefathers didn't enjoy. But the opportunities that are available to the new immigrants to Canada are going to be tremendous. And that can only be a great benefit for us as a country. And ethnic broadcasting is going to play a very important role and helping integrate those future generations into the society.
So do you continue to see immigrants and different cultures coming to Chin to want to increase the depth of their broadcast to their communities?
Well, I can give you an example with respect to, Chin Radio responds to the needs of our communities. So we have five radio stations, and so we program in over 50 languages each week. So it's a big undertaking, but we have a huge network of associate producers, and those producers are on the ground with their communities, and we respond to the needs of those communities. And so, for example, maybe 25 years ago, Chin Radio had about 1 hour a week of Cantonese programming, 1 hour a week, right? And over the last 25 years, it's grown into the #1 Cantonese Mandarin radio station in Toronto, where we have over 60 hours a week of programming directed to the Chinese Asian community. So, we just one day wake up that this is what we were going to do. We responded to the needs of the market that we were serving, and that market was growing and wanted more programming and more connection, and we were able to do that. And that's how we've been able to expand from 1 station to 4 stations.
So that must be a tough
we answer a need.
That must be a tough menu to figure out for your Christmas party. Or
the one thing about our party is that everybody, no matter what part of the world they're from, loves Italian food. So we got it covered.
Well, Lenny, we're coming to an end. Is there any questions from our viewers? We have one here. How would you describe the new leadership in this era?
In general? Like Canadian?
It's not specific, but I would say in general.
In Canadian leadership?
Yes.
Interesting. I personally have been extremely impressed by the leadership shown by our Canadian politicians, if we're talking politics, with respect to the handling of this virus, COVID-19, from all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal. They've conducted a steady hand, and I think, in times of crisis, I think that's when we need leaders who step up make the hard decisions and take us through these difficult courses and give us the strength and the comfort in knowing that the directions that we're going in is it the correct one. And I think that's the real test of strong leadership, is to be inspirational and to guide people in the correct direction. And I think that's what that we've enjoyed. So I got to hand it to you. I think right across the board, speaking for Toronto, I think Torontonians in particular have governed themselves extremely well. I mean, we listen well. All levels of government have communicated extremely well. We've understood what needs to be done, and the results have proven it. And so based on that understanding and based on how well we've come this far, I believe that the recovery is not going to be hampered by misadventure and mistakes and missteps. I think we collectively are going to move forward in the proper direction, and I think that's very encouraging. I think most people feel that way as well. I think speaking of our province in particular, I think most people feel very optimistic about the future.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know what? There's such a big unknown. Where we're going to be and where we're going to be tomorrow. Just a little bit about community. In the past, in the Chin world, how was the CIBPA part of the Chin world? Did it participate? Was it involved? I'm just going to try to get some questions here, Lenny. I'm going to turn you sideways for a second so I can hear you. You can go ahead and comment to the viewers.
So, well, the CIBPA was always a factor as far as Chin Radio was concerned. We're pretty close in age. I mean, CIBPA is about 67, 68 now.
Yeah, very good.
Chin is 54. So I think my dad was an integral part of the CIBPA when it first came together. It was some of the great iconic people in our community that led the way. And it was significant in that, here was a community that was just coming of age or just beginning to sprout its potential. And the CIBPA was the first legitimate organization that brought all of these enthusiastic individuals, both men and women, together under one umbrella. And it was a great sense of encouragement and support. And so I think Chin Radio and my dad in particular, was very, very supportive of all the efforts of the CIBPA, not only what they did for the business community and the professional community, but also their voice at the political level as well. Because at that time, it was very advantageous for the Italian community to be heard as a political voice, and it was. And those political leaders did hear us, and they flocked to our events at the CIBPA event. Every politician wanted to be a part of that community, that organization, and they wanted to be respected and known by the Italian community. And we have the CIBPA to really thank for laying the groundwork for that.
Very good. So I got one more question. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. We don't want to take much of your time. We have a question here. What has our Italian history taught us about culture, racism, and discrimination? What can we learn from the past, and how do we educate our youth about our history?
Well, I can only speak about our history as Canadians. And, my father told me many sad stories of persecution and prejudice about towards the Italian community. And in particular, you've all heard of the Hogs Hollow tragedy, which brought to light the disgraceful treatment of Italian construction workers that cost the life of five men in the tunnel tragedy, which turned the page in construction, and the Green Book was developed, and then construction reform came into place, and that was largely led by the Italian community and the unions that came from that. And by the way, my wife Grace Fusillo's uncle Giovanni Fusillo was one of the 5 that perished in the Hogs Hollow.
Oh.
So there's a lot of history in this with the Chin Radio and the Lombardi family and the Fusillo family that we relate to our history. But the point I want to make is that we as a community suffered quite a bit, and I think we as a community can empathize when we see rampant prejudice and racism against our fellow human beings, because we were once there. You know, Italians were once arrested on College Street in the early 50s for loitering and put into jail, and spent the night in jail because they were having a coffee or having a cigarette in China with a bunch of friends, standing on the street. And back in the days of Victorian Anglo-Saxon Toronto, that was considered against the law, and they were persecuted in that way. And it took years before that changed. So that's just the Italian community. Imagine all the other, our Jewish neighbors, and you know, so many communities suffered at the hand of prejudice and discrimination. And so we as a community, as Italian communities, have an opportunity to show leadership by standing up against racism. You know, standing up against black racism or racism of any kind against racialized communities, because everybody that served on Cheer Radio has been there or is there now. And it's an opportunity for us to speak not only as one community, but as all communities against this sort of thing.
Well, Lenny, we're went overtime, and I can talk for the whole night on this, and maybe one day we can break bread and continue this. But you know, there's and when we froze there, I just had some talk about, you know, the biography that they did, that your wife produced with your sister and yourself, and you know, it really was, you know, Johnny Lombardi was a great communicator, and Lenny, I commend you and your family for continuing that the process of communicating to our community and to every other community. You're truly the founders of multiculturalism. You've given us some great insight on the past, present, and the future of any type of racism or discrimination. It exists, it lives to present day, and as long as we can communicate and have some understanding, we can maybe narrow that gap. So on behalf of the CIBPA Toronto, I take great honor to have this interview with you. I would like to congratulate Chin, Lenny, your wife, yourself, and your sister on your efforts and your
sister Teresa.
Efforts, and your continued efforts in our community and in Canada and what you do for us. We are grateful. We appreciate all the efforts, and it does not go unnoticed nor unmentioned.
Thank you, John. Very, very beautiful words. Thank you so much, and congratulations to you. You did a splendid job tonight. So, you know, you got a fallback career in broadcasting. Let me tell you, anytime you're ready.
That's what I'm aiming for. So to our viewers, why the weights in the back is that when I did my research deeper and deeper, I really came down with two things, and that was strength and endurance. And definitely, Lenny, you are the sign of that. Forza Italia, Forza il Canada, e Forza la famiglia di Chin.
John, si fatta una buona job.
Buonasera.
Ciao.
Grazie. Yeah, there we go.